Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining today's TRU Snacks webinar. Today, we're going to be joined by David Zawikowski in our Transaction Advisory Services practice. And David's going to be walking us through the benefits of BuySide QofE reports, but also how much more important and complex they are in kind of a post-COVID world with the types of nuances and complexity in the transactions that I'm sure many of you have been seeing. Couple of housekeeping items before we start. There is a Q&A window at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you click on that Q&A button, it'll come up. This is where you can submit questions to David and I as we go through the presentation today. Please submit them as you think of them. So if David says something that sparks a question in your mind, go ahead, just pop that window up and throw your question in. We will either address it as we go or hold it for Q&A at the end. The session today is being recorded. It will be shared with you in an email follow-up following the session. And we definitely encourage you to share that with colleagues and other contacts who may be interested in today's topic. Likewise, if you are not on our mailing list for the TRU Snacks invites, please visit our TRU Snacks landing page. You can Google TRU Snacks Citrin Cooperman. It'll bring you to it. There you can sign up for our mailing list and make sure that you get all of the invites to these great weekly half-hour lunchtime webinars that we do. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to David, and very much looking forward to the discussion today and looking forward to your questions as well. So David, over to you.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Steve. Welcome, everybody. I would also like to thank Steve for pronouncing my last name right. Doesn't happen all the time, so much appreciated. Like Steve said, Dave Zawikowski. I'm a director here on the Transaction Advisory Services team, or TAS, the TAS group. I work with both on the buy side and on the sell side, so I represent both buyers and sellers. Most of my work is on the buy side, however. Work with anybody who's looking to buy or sell a company, so it could be a strategic acquirer, both public and private, private equity firms, independent sponsors, search funds, really anybody. In terms of the type of deals, they are oftentimes asset deals, potentially stock deals, carve-outs, growth equity investments, and then I also work on post-closing services, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Bottom line, before I go any further, just want to emphasize that, as I'm sure you can all imagine, COVID has changed everything, and the M&A world is susceptible to that, and so deals have become much more complicated. Because of this, the process, your review process is being elongated. It's more complicated. The deal structures are getting more complicated, and ultimately, it's leading to your decision is taking longer to make. So it's super important that you get started right away on your due diligence as soon as you have your letter of intent signed. So the agenda for today, we're just going to walk through what exactly is due diligence. I'm sure you've all heard due diligence, but what exactly is it? We're going to talk about the actual buy-side services that we perform and that we offer. We're going to talk about COVID-related complications, and then we're going to close out with benefits of a quality of earnings report. So what is due diligence? Very simply, it's assessing a business before you buy it. It's doing your homework. It's kicking the tires. Essentially, you want to understand the financials. You want to understand the earnings power of the business, the cash flow generation, and the overall quality of the business from a financial perspective. This is going to help you, better understand exactly what it is you're buying. It's going to help you make a better investment decision and potentially save some money. Okay, so the overview of the buy-side services. This is my world right here, from pre-LOI to post-closing period. I'll walk you through from left to right, and I'll give you an analogy of this M&A continuum. So think of the pre-LOI period as single life. You're single, you're going out to bars, you're looking for a potential lifetime partner. When you find someone that looks interesting, you create a letter of intent. The letter of intent is kind of like asking someone out on a date. If they sign the letter of intent and they say yes, you start dating. During the dating period, it's due diligence. You're learning about that other person. You're deciding whether or not this person could be a lifetime partner or not. And then if you do decide that they are, you move on to the purchase agreement phase. And this is where it's kind of like a marriage proposal and a wedding at the same time, because this purchase agreement, has to come from the buyer to the seller. The seller has to make some changes, send it back. It kind of goes back and forth for a little while. But at the end of the day, they both signed a purchase agreement and they get married. And then the post-closing period is very simple. It's marriage. It's two parties integrating as one, and living happily ever after as one consolidated business. So throughout this continuum, during the pre-LOI period, what we perform is just a high-level due diligence, and all we're really looking to do is find red flags or potential deal killers, so as to save you time and money of going down the path of due diligence and then getting to the end of due diligence or during due diligence and finding out that that this deal is not good for you, or that the seller has overrepresented EBITDA or something like that. We do this high-level due diligence. It's fairly quick. We just look at some financial statements, maybe a tax return, maybe an audit, a review, a comp, and we just try to give you some a good sense of our thoughts. We do this at no charge, and in hopes that if you do sign the LOI, you'll want us to help you out on the actual due diligence assignment. So if you have the letter of intent is signed by both you and the seller, you move on to the due diligence period. And what we do during that period is the quality of earnings report that you may have heard about, or the Q of E. In the Q of E, the major focus there is on EBITDA, or adjusted EBITDA. This is essentially where you gauge the earnings power of the business. How much cash and how much earnings does this company generate? We also are focused on net working capital. Net working capital is essentially current assets minus current liabilities, and that gets adjusted for cash and debt and anything tax related. And this is an area of the transaction that many times is really sellers and sometimes buyers don't fully understand, or they're potentially not on the same page. So this is an area of contention. After net working capital, we do a bunch of other analyses, like customer concentration, vendor concentration, various margin analyses, potentially by customer, by business segment, by product, what have you. Whatever we have the data for, we can analyze. And then finally, we look at operating expenses, which could be the seller's compensation, owner's comp, rent, anything like that. During our review of the financials, if we find any accounting errors or accounting irregularities, right? So we'll recast the P&L and basically present the picture net of adjustments, and this will tell you exactly what it is you're going to. Now, in addition to the quality of earnings report that we do, we have teams that do tax due diligence. We have teams that do IT due diligence, and then we also have a team that does tax structuring. Now, during a transaction, there are a number of items that could, that we call deal killers, and taxes is certainly one of them. So it's important to get a tax due diligence going on as well. If after due diligence, the buyer is liking what they see and it looks like they want to move forward, they will prepare the purchase agreement, send it to the seller, and like I said before, the seller will go make changes, or they'll go back and forth, and then eventually they'll sign the agreement and they'll consummate the transaction. When that's done, the services we perform post transaction are potentially an inventory observation. Now, this is important because you want to make sure that the seller transferred all of the inventory or all of the assets that they said they would. So you could hire us to go in and we actually count the inventory, much like we would count the inventory for an audit. The other thing we do, right, the closing working capital calculation. This is what I mentioned before in terms of post-closing assistance. Usually around 60 to 90 days after the transaction, the buyer will recalculate the seller's balance sheet as of closing, and based on the net working capital calculation and the peg that was agreed to in the purchase agreement, there may be a cash adjustment there. We also do recurring audit and tax work, and then we do the purchase price allocation as well.
So I think before we get into this next section, it's important to consider the unevenness that COVID has provided kind of to a lot of the companies that are looking to transact. So I think one of the things that we've seen is a lot of what we're about to talk about, what David's about to talk about, is going to depend on industry subsector. It's going to depend on the length of time that COVID impacted the business for and how long it has. So I think we've probably seen, that David could verify, we've probably seen the transaction environment change 3 or 4 times since last March, right? Which is just a much more rapid sort of pace of change. So keep that in mind as we go through it. If there are questions specific to an industry or specific to a type of business situation, an expansion, an evolution, anything like that, and how it might impact U of E and the process, now would be a good time to ask those questions, after kind of we get through the high level here. David, any other comments on that?
No, that makes sense, and it's a perfect segue into this next topic of COVID. I mean, you can't have a webinar without talking about COVID and the impacts. All of the companies that we're seeing now are, they're either in crisis mode or they're coming out of crisis mode. They're into recovery period, and as a result, there's fewer quality deals out there. And all of this leads to an overall longer due diligence period, and not necessarily financial due diligence, which is what I do, but an overall elongated period for your due diligence. And as well, it's also leading to more complicated deal structures. When I say more complicated deal structures, pre-COVID, there would be potentially an earnout that would be for the next year. Now what we're seeing is 1, 2, 3-year earnout periods, because both parties are trying to, they want to make sure that the business returns to the pre-COVID levels. So they're giving the company, a few years to get back, and all this stuff just takes longer. It's another topic to discuss. We're also seeing earnouts or the equivalent of an earnout on net working capital, whereas that had never been, I had really never seen a net working capital earnout before. And also, with PPP loans, this is also complicating matters. What do you do with the PPP loan? If the company still has it, it's not forgiven, but they applied for forgiveness, what do you do? These are all things that are complicating matters. And so, all of that leads to, again, just to repeat, deals are more complicated, and you have to start early. You have to, get your diligence going as soon as possible, because it's going to just take a little bit longer. Okay, so now all of this COVID nonsense has led to underperformance of businesses. And what sellers are trying to do in order to make their business look better is make these, sometimes wild adjustments, to EBITDA. Now, we suggest very strongly to only accept adjustments that are based on facts and data. Anything that's, what would have happened if, that's not really an add back. The add backs that we accept, more or less, are one-time quantifiable costs. Like, we had to buy more masks. We had to clean the offices, every day instead of, once a week. So those are the types of add backs that we do accept. Now, the pro forma adjustments, I've seen a number of these, and they include things like lost revenue. We had a customer and COVID came and their sales dipped, by 50%. And so we want to add back both revenue and EBITDA for the loss of that business. Now, those types of adjustments are good to know, and they're helpful to understand what the company would have looked like potentially, but that's not an adjustment that should be accepted in terms of the adjusted EBITDA. There's also net working capital implications for COVID. As customers' businesses were declining, they started slowing down their payments. So companies' AR balances are building because their collections are slowing. Likely as a result of that, they're paying slower. So now their AP balances are rising. And then you have inventory. If you have a lot of inventory and you're unable to sell it, you have a buildup of inventory. And if you have a buildup of inventory, depending upon what type of inventory it is, you might have inventory that's spoiled or no longer saleable. So now you have to, make an adjustment for that. So all of this leads up to the big question of what exactly is average net working capital? What should be included in this deal? And that's, again, causing problems, and it's causing more back and forth between buyer and seller, and elongating the transaction process. So finally, what are the benefits of a quality of earnings report? As I mentioned before, you're going to understand a lot better what exactly it is that you're buying. You're going to know the margins, gross margins, the operating margins. You're going to understand customer concentration better. You'll get a sense for the quality of the recurring revenue. You're going to potentially save money with purchase price adjustments. In order to save money on a purchase price adjustment, we might find additional add backs to EBITDA, or we might find that add backs to EBITDA are not acceptable. So if you're paying $10 million for a 2 million EBITDA business, and we find that business really only earns $1 million, you would have to cut your purchase price in half. So there's savings right there. Obviously, everybody wants to save money, but you're also increasing your returns. We also find other purchase price adjustments like a PPP loan. The PPP loan is a debt-like item, and that has to be the responsibility of the seller, not the responsibility of. We also might find something that will change the deal structure to be an asset purchase from a stock purchase. As a buyer, you typically want to do asset purchases, but for one reason or the next, you might be aiming towards a stock purchase. If you find something that's not preferable for you, you might have some leverage to change the deal to an asset purchase and essentially convince the seller that it's going to be an asset purchase or it's going to be no purchase. And then finally, sometimes the best transaction that you do is the one that you don't do. Buying a bad company just to buy a company is probably not a good idea. So going down the road of due diligence and finding problems and then deciding not to buy the company sometimes is a very good decision. So that's all I have. I don't know if we have any questions, Steve.
We do, yes. We've got a few questions that have come in, Dave. So one that just came in, we'll go in reverse order here. How do you handle non-cash items when adjusting EBITDA? For example, deferred rent entries is a specific example.
So deferred rent, so EBITDA is essentially intended to be a proxy for cash flow. So a deferred rent item, you could possibly go one way or the other because it is GAAP. You'd want your rent expense to reflect the cash expense of the business. Do we have any others?
Oh yeah, loaded up with questions today. So, all right. So, how does a Q of E play in with an audit? Do you need a Q of E if the company gets an audit? If you're going to do a Q of E, should you also get an audit? What's that decision-making process?
So, yeah, just because a company has an audit doesn't mean you don't need a Q of E. One reason, for example, the audits are done on the fiscal year ends, so it doesn't represent really any current data. So, right now we have audits for 2019, but we're doing a transaction using potentially November or December as November or December 2020 as the trailing 12-month period. So having the audit gives you good confidence that the numbers are probably correct, but it doesn't let you ignore a quality of earnings exercise. Also what we do in a quality of earnings report is we focus on EBITDA and net working capital. These items are not discussed, not analyzed specifically in an audit. So these are all calculations that need to be done outside of an audit going into a transaction, which have lots and lots of different implications on the transaction. Also, our work that we do, we try to do monthly calculations. So we have monthly trial balances. We do very detailed work. So instead of just looking at one column with 2019, we look at every single month throughout our due diligence period, which oftentimes is potentially 36 months or longer. So we're able to look on each account on the trial balance each month and do a lot of very intricate, detailed work.
All right, great. Everybody's talking about PPP. Our session next week is on PPP. Round 2 of PPP opening up, I think, has once again created this real focus on the structure and usage of these loans. So if you're a company that has a PPP, but it hasn't been forgiven yet, right? You talked a little bit about forgiveness, but what about if it hasn't been forgiven? How is that going to be treated during your due diligence?
So if it has not been forgiven, the implications are as follows. For net working capital, if it's recorded as a current liability, it should be removed from net working capital calculations. So number one, it comes out of net working capital. Number two, it goes on to what we call a debt and debt-like schedule. Basically, what we're doing there is saying that PPP loan is a debt item. The debt item belongs to the seller. So the buyer is not going to take on this loan and then hope it gets forgiven. They're going to just basically rid themselves of that loan and leave it with the seller. Now, what will happen is you could also put the amount of that loan into escrow, until which time the loan is forgiven or not.
Got it. Okay, great. All right, we've got two kind of back-to-back questions here on sell side versus buy side. So the first thing is, if you're a buyer and the company that you're looking to acquire has done a sell side due diligence, how should that play? Should you accept that? How should that play into your decision-making process, both before and after the LOI is signed?
Yeah, that's a good question. I always like to have, it is often very beneficial to have a sell side quality of earnings report when I'm on the buy side. But what you have to, of course, understand is, you can't just take it for its word. It's just one of those things where you accept it, but you don't accept it at face value. So it helps you do your work a little bid faster, but you're not, we do not recommend that, they have a sell side quality of earnings, we're good. Well, let's just go ahead and do the deal. We'd recommend you still hire a buy side, team to at least review that report, ask questions, pick it apart, make sure that what that sell side company did, make sure that they did the right stuff.
So I guess that leads into the next question that just came in, which is what can be done by the sponsor on the buy side QofE to keep the cost of the engagement down or contain the cost?
That's a great question. We get similar questions like that all the time. And what we offer is a couple of things. You can look at our TAS group as sort of a bespoke quality of earnings provider. If you want 1, 2, 3, 4 things done, we can do that for you. We can limit our scope of work to a proof of cash, an EBITDA analysis, and a net working capital analysis. We can limit our deliverable to just an Excel workbook, or we can do the full-fledged write-up, in a PDF professional with graphs and charts. So you have options to limit our scope, and you have options to limit our deliverable to keep the costs down.
Perfect. All right, great. Well, we are right at time here. So Dave, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate the insight and all the preparation you did in advance of this session. If anybody wants to learn more, please reach out to Dave directly. His email address will be in the follow-up materials, and it's on our website as well. There you go. So his email and phone is right there. So feel free to reach out to him. The next 3 sessions that are coming up. So next week is I don't even know what number this is, but it's a PPP loan update. It's going to be a quick hit, not a deep dive, but kind of an overview of this next round of PPP. That's on the 28th, again, same time, 12 o'clock. On February 4th, can't believe it's February already, 2 weeks, we're going to be doing a bankruptcy and restructuring session with Joe Cashel, who leads our bankruptcy and restructuring practice. And on the 11th, we'll be doing a look at trends in enterprise systems and business analytics, joined by Smidge Simon, who leads those services for us. So without further ado, last item of the day is we have to give away our customary snack basket to somebody who joined from one of our local snack purveyors. After a random drawing, the recipient of that snack basket today will be Steve Raymond from the DAC Group. So Steve, congratulations. Hope you enjoy the snacks, and somebody from marketing will reach out to you to get shipping info. Folks, once again, thank you for joining us. Pleasure to have you. Sign up for our mailing list, read our videos, share, like, and we hope to see you again next week for our PPP update. Have a great rest of your week and enjoy the weekend.